sex, drugs, rock and roll, investment bankers. This week on Inside the Broker's Studio. Welcome to This Week on Inside the Broker's Studio. Today we're going to talk about the SoHo Effect. SoHo means south of Houston Street, and the history of the neighborhood between Houston Street and Canal Street in Manhattan is very rich. At the time of the American Revolution through to 1900, there were fields there and also brothels. South of there, in the financial district, the old 5 Points, you had a residential district which was actually burned down in the 1830s and then rebuilt as all commercial area. Fast forward through the 20s and 30s, there was incredible amount of textile manufacturing throughout Soho, and it was a real center of business. In the 50s, really starting in the Depression, but after the Depression, the manufacturing economy of Manhattan was diminished. The textile workers and the manufacturing was no longer happening in Soho. After a while, it became a real public health problem with hundreds of abandoned buildings and apartments, and they were squatted, and they became fire hazards, and there were famous fires that happened because all of these buildings were in disrepair. Simultaneous to that, nobody wanted to go there because there was high crime, and the city's population was really going down as people fled the inner city for Long Island. In about the 70s, the city council passed an ordinance after artists had been squatting in the late 60s and the 70s, which allowed for properties, lofts, former factories to be inhabited by artists without having a certificate of occupancy. So you'd have a loft, and you've seen these Soho lofts maybe, and you would have the city say, we're not going to bother you. If you're an artist, you can live there. This is what the Soho Effect is all about. And in the 70s and then in the 80s and 90s, you had a skyrocketing value as Soho went through a renaissance. Artists like Basquiat, Keith Haring, Andy Warhol was known for their Soho gallery openings. And this became the epicenter not only of the art world, but of the world. Now in 1987, the city council passed another ordinance saying that if you were an investment banker, you could live in Soho in one of these artist lofts without having to be an artist. The property values, if we track them, and the rents in Soho through the 80s, 90s to the aughts, and now the teens, have astronomically grown. This is called the Soho Effect, and it's not only something that affected New York City, but the Soho Effect is a financial term used in cities all over the world. In London, there is a neighborhood called Soho. It has nothing to do with being south of Houston Street. It's named for New York City Soho. In Detroit, faced with a devastated population with the exodus of GM and also the housing crisis, we see today a Soho Effect, where artists have bought homes for $1 many times from the city of Detroit, homes that have been condemned, and revitalized that city, and now it's on the up and up. The Soho Effect can affect neighborhoods here in New York City, such as Williamsburg being a very mature example now, whereas in the late 90s you had artists taking over these areas. Now it's a very hip area with very expensive condominiums and restaurants and shops. Anywhere where you see artists moving in and beautifying an area because they can get in cheap is called the Soho Effect. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any other questions about Soho real estate or where the Soho Effect might take place next within New York City, please reach out. This is David.Rosen signing off.